My name's Klancher. I'm an author, photographer, and I'm also the founder of Octane Press. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how I came to be a publisher of books about old farm equipment. Basically, if you go way back, the story starts when I was a kid. The two things I was into were books and motorcycles. I started reading when I was 4 years old and read pretty much everything I could get my hands on since, and always loved riding and always felt that someday I would be a rider. I also loved motorcycles. I had some kind of bug that I loved mechanical things, and motorcycles really struck a nerve. When I was 5, I saw one in a shop, fell in love with it, and my dad finally gave in 6 years later when I was 11 and got a bike, and that became a real passion with me. So that and the sciences and books were really the things I loved the most. I grew up as a teacher's kid, grew up in farm country. My dad had bought a farm and he didn't want the farm portion of it. So he bought just the house, and the farm was a family nearby ran that. So a lot of my friends were farmers, and I grew up around it and certainly around tractors. I wouldn't say it was a passion, but it was something I knew a lot about. When time came to go to college, my aptitude and everything else said I should be in the sciences or in engineering, and I thought, well, I'm going to be an engineer because I love mechanical things. I love working with my hands. I thought electrical engineering might be better. I'm also a big computer geek. I had done a lot of programming and those kind of things in high school, and I went to school, and engineering schooling did not agree with me. I'd always been a great student. I was a terrible engineering student. And I struggled with that for about 3 years. And I finally decided, and I always thought I would become an engineer and write on the side. And that's how I'd make my money as an engineer and write. And I realized that just wasn't it. I was going to need to just go do this writing thing. So I switched to journalism and switched to science journalism. And that was a moment that really, for me in my young life, where things really changed, where I was just like, wow, this is a fit. So I got involved in the school newspaper. I was at the University of Minnesota, who happened to have a great journalism program and a specific science journalism program, which was great. And I started running the engineering school magazine, and I just loved that. I was on it for a year. I was on the staff. It was a great magazine, and I was able to do some articles that sort of attracted some attention. I won some awards. The next year I went back and ran the magazine, was the editor-in-chief, and just learned a ton about publishing, and I had hit my niche. Well, one of my classmates got a job at a company called Motor Books, and Motor Books is a book publisher that does transportation. And at the time they were doing tractor books, and that was kind of when the tractor books first came, and Motor Books really discovered that. They brought a little book in from Europe, and it sold really well. They created another book called The American Farm Tractor, and it sold a ton. So they were doing this whole series, and my friend was working there, and he said, hey, I think what you write about science and engineering, I think this crowd would love reading about that from a tractor perspective. So I was like, tractors really? And I was like, okay. So I went to a tractor show, and I was also a photographer. I learned photography in college and very quickly was good at that. I was shocked because I'd never been artistic. I was an engineer, and I thought, art, I'm no good at that. But photography, I really had a natural sense for composition. My technical skills were terrible, to be honest, but I learned those. And I've actually become very good at technicals. But for me, it was composition that was natural. So when they gave me this book, I said, well, I can shoot and write. I said, this would be great. So I went to a tractor show and started taking pictures. And there was an old F20, and it was rusty. I've still got this picture. I squeezed up next to it to take a close-up shot, and the smell off the engine, an old engine has a distinct smell. I think it's the leaking oil, honestly, but it smells a certain way, and it reminded me of my grandfather. And my grandfather loved equipment, loved farming, and loved his tractors. He had snowmobiles. He was a tech guy. He loved stuff. And all of a sudden, it just came flooding back. And that was kind of a trigger. I was like, this is pretty cool. This is part of my heritage. This is something that makes sense to me. And then as I started doing research, I came to understand the influence the tractor had on our society. And I have this line now where the web wouldn't exist without tractors because Steve Jobs would have been out in the fields. He wouldn't have been in his garage playing around with computers. So it's a little bit of a joke, but it's true. It's that machine changed our world. So I really came to absolutely love it. And the photography was a fit too. I had been kind of an outdoor travel nature photographer And farm tractors, a lot of the beauty is the farm setting. So it all just worked. I did a couple books on tractors, and they all sold very well. I really enjoyed it, and that was that. Fast forward to 2006, and I'd been working for this book. This book publisher eventually hired me, and I became an acquisitions editor there, which basically means I'm a product engineer for books. I would go out, find ideas, and help the authors make a book and pitch it to the company. You have to sell it to the company, basically. I worked for them at a salary. So I did that for several years, and I was getting tired of working for somebody. And I was always a very active freelancer. I wrote books on the side, I wrote for magazines, I traveled, shot, I did all kinds of things, did sports, a lot of travel. I love traveling, and that was good. And I have a nice mix of skills. I can write and I can shoot. So they would send me, and I'd be a little cheaper than a photographer and a writer. So I got a lot of work there, and that was good. But I decided it was time to quit my day job and go be a full-time freelance contributor. I quit in 2006, 2007 happened, and the market was very tough. And I'd been writing books for publishers. I did that for about another 4 years, and I just came to decide that there's just no way. I did one book in particular that nothing really went right on the publisher's end. I really did a lot of things, and my wife and I sat down and said, hey, let's not do this anymore. Let's do it with our own company. So I started Octane Press with about $500. There's a book called The Farmall Dynasty. It's the first book we published. I did a book 10 years before that. It's the text from that book. That book was out of print, so I owned the rights to the text. We published it, and I did the cover for a 12-pack, and I think we traded services for the design, and it's all done on the cheap. And we put it out, and it sold pretty well, and I started doing those books as well, some books with other people. And very quickly we got great press. The New York Times picked up one of our book signings and covered it. We had a book called Taxi Confidential. And I just took every nickel from the company for the first 5 years and put it back into it. So I didn't take any money. I kept freelancing to pay my bills. And so I was writing and editing for people, but let the company just grow and grow. And when we did Red Tractors, that was our first big hit. And that was a huge risk for the company. I knew, because I had been writing about them, there was a need for that era, the modern era needed to be covered well. It never had. I also believed, I wasn't sure of it, but I believed that if we did it right and we interviewed a lot of people and we got a lot of information and we went deep, if you look at the older books, they're pretty shallow. There's not a lot of information, there's pictures. Here we interviewed, I think, about 50 people for that, all who had worked for the company, got their stories in there. We got all the prototypes in there. We show every model. Did a lot of things that I always felt we should do, and I never was able to do it at someone else's company. With our company, we could. But when we came out with it, we pretty much we made a little money on a pre-sale to CaseIH with that. We took every nickel from that and put it into the book instead of making money on that. So we took a pretty big risk, but that in September of 2013, so the way you do these, you send them to the printer. It takes about 2.5 months for it to come back. So we sent it to the printer. We had printed a certain amount, and they were due to arrive in our warehouse September 7th. On September 4th, every single book that hit the warehouse was sold. We had sold out the entire run, and that really just put my company on the map. We were profitable every year. We never lost money. But that got us to the point where we could start paying employees and really start to grow. So we're still very small. We have a couple full-time employees, a lot of freelance people. But this market has been really important for us. And one thing that I've really learned is if you do something right in terms of a book, if you really put the time in and make it good, it's easy to market. When you spend a little bit of marketing money, it goes a long ways because people go, oh, this is great. I love it. I want it. And something very special has been going to the Red Powers. A lot of book publishers don't really do that. They don't have the direct contact with people. We come here, and not only do we learn about the market, learn what people want, we've made some great friends and have some people we see every year. And a number of the people at IH and CaseIH have become friends, and it's really become much bigger than the books or even a business. So But I feel incredibly blessed to be able to do what I really love to do, which is go out and take pictures and write stories for a living. I just, it's a lot of, if you take that last path, it's kind of a lot of twists that just went my way. So I really enjoy it. I love it, and really appreciate the time to tell my story.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Appreciate it.